Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wine. Welcome back to art class. Today we will be starting a drawing unit that will use a special kind of doodle technique called Zentangle. So today we're going to be learning all about Zentangles. So let's get started. Our learning target for this week says I will create a Zentangle drawing of my hands. Now that's the big learning target of the whole unit. We're obviously not going to try to do the entire project in one day. So our question for today is, how can I use lines, shapes, and color to create unique Zentangle patterns? This is an example of what a finished project for this unit looks like. So today we're going to be learning about the techniques that these students used. So the art of Zentangle was developed by two different artists from Massachusetts, Maria Thomas and Rick Roberts. They developed this kind of art in 2004. So even though that seems kind of far away in the world of art, this is a really new style of artwork. Zentangle is a system of drawing patterns that helps increase your focus and creativity. So if you're trying to concentrate on something, this is a way to sort of develop your brain so that you're able to concentrate for long periods of time. It's also a way to help you become more creative. This is another example of a Zentangle hand. Look at all the way that the artists use different kinds of lines and different kinds of shapes to create the patterns and the designs in their hand. Also notice that while most of these designs are black and white, this artist did add a little pop of color to the fingernails to make it interesting. So creating Zentangles can also be used as a way to help relax. It's a form of relaxation. The word Zen is an activity that is like meditating. So it's like an art meditation or like doing yoga for the mind. Or in my son's school, they call it mindful breathing exercises. So this is a way that you can just calm and quiet your brain. Again, if you look at this Zentangle drawing, you notice many different patterns created with the black and white on the hand. And then you also see that this artist used a pop of blue in the middle of the hand and a blue up on the wrist and arm to give it some added interest. In Zentangle patterns, lines are used to create repeating patterns, and those patterns seem to get tangled up with each other. They keep going and going and going. Lines can be placed close together or far apart. So if I look at this example, I see that this area of the fingers just has a few lines, and those lines are placed far apart. That gives this part of the hand a very light value. I see that these stripes along the bottom are placed with lines that are a little close together, giving it a medium value and a medium dark value. Or if I want to create areas that look even darker, I can go back and color in parts of the pattern. So that is something that you will need to explore as you are creating your own patterns so that you can make different areas of the drawing stand out. Do you want to make areas very light, very dark, or somewhere in between? The directions for our final project are pretty simple. You're simply going to be tracing your hand on a sheet of paper. And you're going to trace your hand 4 or 5 times so that you're working to really fill up most of your page. Then you're going to be taking some of the Zentangle patterns that you created and using those patterns to fill in the different areas on your paper. You will be using one color to decide where you want to create some colored patterned areas to help create interest. So take a look at this artwork. How could you describe the different kind of patterns that you see? Look at how the artist combined straight lines. Look at how the artist used curved lines in some of the patterns. Here's one with curves. Here's one with a spiral. Look at how the artists used different shapes in their artwork. And look at how the artist created different values. The background has a light value because it has just a few lines that are placed far apart. Some of the areas have medium values with lines that are placed closer together. And some of the areas have darker values where they actually colored in some of their shapes. One thing that's important to note, and we'll come back and revisit this idea when we start our hands, is once you have drawn your hands, those areas where the fingers crisscross, each one of those areas gets a different pattern. So you're no longer thinking about making this whole finger have one pattern and this whole finger have one pattern. Every single different small shape that you create gets a different pattern. That's why the next step of this project, developing the patterns, is so important. You want to have many different patterns to work from, and you want some of those patterns to be your own original ideas. You don't want to just copy other Zentangle patterns that other artists have done. So today, we are going to start a process where we will be creating our own Zentangle patterns. This is done in 3 different steps. The first step is to draw a really simple line and just repeat it. So you can see in the first box, the artist just drew a few lines that go diagonally from one side of the square to the other, and then they crisscross that with another straight kind of line. It almost makes an empty checkerboard sort of feel. So the first step is drawing a very simple line and repeating that in the area where you're practicing your patterns. Then the second step is to add another type of line or shape to make the pattern more complex or complicated and more interesting. Remember, adding extra lines or shapes also starts to make the value a little bit darker. So you can see that they took the first thing that they did, and then they just started adding some of these little wavy lines that go from area to area. It goes from the top of the line down to where the 2 lines meet and back up. And they just repeated that throughout the whole section. And then finally, the last step to creating your Zentangle pattern is finding some areas that you could color in to make it darker. This artist chose to color in all these bottom, almost little curved, they're almost like triangles, but the edges aren't quite straight. And they just went back and colored all of those areas in. Repeating this process is going to give you 1, 2, 3, possibly even 4 different patterns with one idea. We're going to start that work this week, and then we will finish it next week. So developing our patterns is going to be a 2-week process. You can continue on to the next video where I will demonstrate this process. I hope you have a wonderful week and keep on creating.